Hello hipsters, Chris here from the podcast. Just hitting you up with a bit of information on our sponsors. We are very happy to say this season we are backed for the season by Chris and his team at 4elementswebdesign.co.uk. That's where you'll find them. You'll also find them on Twitter at 4elementsDES. What do 4Elements do? Well, if you're looking to build yourself the most hipsterish website possible, they are the guys for you. Branding, web design, marketing, video production, they're the four main elements, but they also look at so much more besides. Don't forget their tagline, beautiful websites, brands and strategic marketing solutions to take your business to the next level. Hit up Chris and his team, let them know that we sent you, and he might give you a little present. No promises, but what he will do is give you a fantastic website. So just a reminder, that is 4elementswebdesign.co.uk. And now, on with the show. Hello and welcome to the Football Hipsters podcast. I am your host, Chris. You know me. And tonight, at some point at least, it is a full house. Not straight away, but we'll let you know why in a second. So let me introduce to you my panel for some weekly football chatter. First of all, it's the man on the buttons. It's Mr. Josh Dorr. Hello, Josh.
Good evening, Chris. How's everything with you?
It's okay, mate. It's going. Back to work today after 10 days leave. That's always a bit of pill to swallow, but it is what it is.
Bloody part-timers.
I know. At least I've got a job. That's what I keep telling myself. And how is work treating you in sunny Reading? Evening, Mr. Ross Bramble.
Good evening. I have some complaints, but none that I shall air here.
I like that. Life overall treating you well is the most important thing. I'm sure there's many things to talk Championship with you about shortly, so we should be doing that. And the man from Hull, Haverth, returned, not via Spain, but he's here to talk a bit of Spain as well. It's Mr. Joel Melwar. Hello, Joel.
Good evening, Chris. Good evening, all.
Evening to you, sir. And I'm sure we'll touch on a certain club close to where you live in a short while as well, because there's been some news, hasn't there? So I know you and Ross are keen to chew that over, which we will get to very shortly. Lana will be with us a little bit later on. She's at work at the moment, so when she comes sailing to the rescue, we will dial her in. So she'll be with us a little bit later on. Right, in our new sort of format of trying to keep to roughly a 90-minute show, we will waste no time. And we'll jump in with the weekend's action in England to start with. So, Joel, you've been away for a while, so I'm going to pick on you first of all. Probably the big game of the weekend, quote unquote, was the Manchester United Arsenal game in the Premier League on Saturday evening. Ended in a 3-1 victory for Jose Mourinho's men. Very, very good game of football, quite unexpectedly, I think it's fair to say. Did you feel the right team won? Was there an element of luck, or was it all about the tactical planning of Mourinho?
No, I don't think the right team won. I think Arsenal deserved it on the balance of play. I thought they had far more better chances. I don't even know if it was a Mourinho masterclass, because when he usually does that, so he plays a team that is so good on the counter-attack and takes its chances, he's usually so solid and denies the other team chances. That wasn't the case on Saturday. Arsenal had so many chances. Someone put a stat in the group that De Gea made the most saves in a Premier League game or something ridiculous. And I think that was it. I just think it was a day when De Gea was unbelievable. Arsenal were guilty of missing chances as well, because some of them they should have scored. It's a shame for Arsenal. I thought the referee was poor. I thought the Pogba was a red card. I thought Koscielny should have gone. I thought Welbeck deserved a penalty when he was brought down in the box. So I think Arsenal can feel aggrieved. And to be fair, I think that's the best I've seen Arsenal play. Obviously you guys see a lot more of Arsenal than I do and follow it a lot more closely, but that's the best I've seen them play. for a long time. There was a lot of intensity to the game. They were closing down well. They were creating chances. But United were ruthless on the break, and I think at 2-1 the game was well in the balance. I think if Arsenal would have scored and made it 2-0 when Sanchez missed that chance, I think there was only one winner. But then obviously Lingard gets one on the break and it's game over. But it's slightly unfortunate for Arsenal. But I think just in terms of United, in terms of what Mourinho did tactically, I think his hand's been forced ever so slightly by the fact that they have to win games. With Man City going to Chelsea and winning and beating, Liverpool at home, those games can't now be draws. We've seen a lot of the top four in recent years just drawing with each other. That can't happen now. United had to go there and win. And I think it's like a tap. I think he turned the attack on slightly and he lost some solidity defensively. So I think that's something to bear in mind. It's all set up for the game next week now. So I think that game's massive. It was a must-win game for United because everybody felt they were going to beat Man City would beat West Ham, so he had to win that game, and they did. But it wasn't in the way that any of us expected. I don't think.
No. Well said. I think it was very much a tale of two sides, but one result. And Josh, on this subject, you got a stat on De Gea there, which you can share with our listeners. He obviously was, for me, clearly man of the match. How they gave it to Jesse Lingard, I thought was a bit of an insult on De Gea. But when you look at it in isolation, I mean, it's a result that, whilst it's not ideal for Arsenal, of course, because they lose at home, it doesn't really massively affect their position in the league, though, given other results. And Manchester United, as Joel said there, they have to win these games now, don't they? They can't just sit back and hope for the best because Man City, as we'll come on to, have just continued to keep winning.
Yeah, certainly it wasn't a game that really Jose, I think, would have enjoyed because, if you're relying on your goalkeeper having an absolutely world-class game to get you through it, then, it's not good tactically. If they give that many chances to a more clinical side, which we've seen from this season Man City are, then they're going to have a problem and they'll be on the receiving end of a scoreline like that. The stat I had was actually on the two Manchester goalkeepers. So De Gea, as Joel alluded to, made 14 saves against Arsenal. His opposite number, Ederson, in his whole Man City Premier League career has only made 17. That's the kind of two sides that we'll be seeing going head-to-head next weekend, and it's going to be a very interesting tie because Man City are not playing particularly well, or at least not as clinical as they were earlier in the season, but they're still getting the results, and I've never seen a Jose Mourinho side so open as you saw against Arsenal this weekend. Whether or not it was the two catastrophic mistakes so early on that put them 2-0 up after 10 minutes that really just kind of threw a curveball into Jose because, he wasn't expecting to have such a big lead there, and the general setup he's got is just to grab a goal, and perhaps they'd taken it a bit too early and had to sit back and absorb pressure, which, if De Gea was, didn't have his Weetabix, he probably would have conceded a couple more, but again, I think Arsenal was slightly unlucky, but they were, with the two mistakes, kind of catalysts for their own downfall. Yeah, agreed. And you can't give a Jose Mourinho side a 2-goal lead and expect to get anything from the game unless you play absolutely out of your skin, which, as we say, Arsenal did, but came up on the end of a wrong result. Manchester City took full advantage of that with a 2-1 victory over West Ham. Not really a lot to say about this game other, to be perfectly honest, that we haven't said already, so we're not really going to cover this in too much depth. Much improved performance for David Moyes' West Ham, who went into the break 1-0 up through Ogbonna, but 2 goals. Nicolas Otamendi, another late goal, 7 minutes to go from David Silva, secured the points for Man City. And as you say, that puts them into the game with Manchester United next weekend. Is a huge game. But Ross, I want to chuck 2 teams into one for the next sort of bit, and that's the chasing pack. We saw, in fact, I'm actually going to give you 3 teams. I'm going to go full
full hipster here. We saw Watford take a point from Tottenham Hotspur. That was at Vicarage Road, a 1-1 draw there. Some more points dropped for Spurs. Heung-min Son scoring for Spurs before Kabasele had put Watford in front, sorry, after I should say, before Davinson Sanchez was sent off. We saw Brighton lose at home to Liverpool 5-1. A couple of goals there for Roberto Firmino amongst them. And we saw Chelsea kick the weekend off with a 3-0 win, including as an Eden Hazard masterclass after Newcastle had somewhat surprisingly taken the lead as they did at Old Trafford recently. So what I want to ask you is, of those three results, which of those three impressed you most? And who is the more likely sort of candidate to push the Manchester clubs this season, if indeed it's not Arsenal, of course, because they're the other one in the mix?
I'd probably have to say, it's very tough. I'd probably have to say that Chelsea impressed me the most against Newcastle. I mean, Liverpool scoring 5 at Brighton did surprise me, because Brighton have been a lot better this season than a result like that suggests. I'm not convinced they deserved too much more than 5-1 from the actual fixture, but I thought 5 was certainly quite a surprising amount of goals for Liverpool to score away from home at a team like Brighton. But Chelsea, I thought, showed a lot of steel to come back from their opening the opening goal they conceded to Dwight Gale. So I'd probably say Chelsea, but I mean, it's like you say, it was an Hazard masterclass. He did come alive in that game and brought them through, which they haven't had a hell of a lot of this season so far. I mean, we've already seen bits of them so far this season, which suggests that maybe there's not a completely happy camp there at the moment, whether that comes from the manager, the chairman, or the players themselves. But certainly with players like Hazard in the team, they can have days like that where they can go behind and look maybe a little bit meeker and still come out with a very nice win. As for which side is going to push the Manchester sides, I mean, they'll all be in and around. I think they'll all play their part. I worry the most for Tottenham. 4 games without a win now. They're level on points with Burnley, so they need to straighten their ship up quickly. I think they will, but I think it'll probably be too late at this stage. I think they'll be looking at making waves in the Champions League to kind of give Europe the impression that Tottenham have arrived. Because I suspect that with every passing result, the league slips further and further away. And then Liverpool, I mean, they'll score bucket loads this season, but they'll also concede, silly amounts of goals as well. So depends entirely on how many points they can scrounge from those kinds of games that will get tight and will be 3-3 at one stage, 2-2. Can they nick that last minute goal, or will they be punished like they have been by some of the smaller sides? And then Chelsea, I think a lot depends on just keeping Conte happy. As long as he's happy to be there and wants to work for them, then fantastic. But there's constant rumblings about whether he's happy there or whether he's going to go back to Italy or whether he's going to take the Italian managerial position. Tricky, but I think as long as Conte's there, you can't count Chelsea out. So I think personally that the title is going to Manchester City. I have since the start of the season, but of those teams, I suspect Chelsea will be the ones pushing them the closer.
Yeah, I don't think anyone disputes the City call. I think you're pretty much bang on there. I think it'd be a very brave man to put any money against Man City winning it at this stage. Whether they beat Manchester United or not, we'll cover next week. That will be an interesting one. But looking down the table, a couple of other noticeable results that we aren't going to cover in too much depth today. West Brom 0, Crystal Palace 0. Not a thriller. Alan Pardew's return to Crystal Palace, but a point nevertheless for both sides, which lifts Palace off the bottom. And they're replaced by Swansea City, who lost to Stoke by 2-1. Just very briefly on Swansea. Joel, let me bring you in on Swansea. Are they? I think we briefly touched on the future of Paul Clement last week, but it's another 2 results since we've last done a podcast. Lost to Chelsea, no disgrace there, but losing a game like this to Stoke, where they were in front. The board have kind of they're supporting Clement, but do you sort of foresee a slightly unhappy Christmas for Mr. Clement if these results continue and maybe he gets replaced?
Yeah, I think it's inevitable. I think teams at Christmas in the bottom 3 will take a look at it. If you look at the bottom 3 now, it's Palace and West Ham. Well, they're not going to change the manager, and generally it does happen. So Swansea will probably look to make a change if they're still in the bottom 3 at Christmas. It's just the done thing, really, and I think it would show a massive show of faith to Clement if they did keep him. But can you see him turn around at the minute? It doesn't look like it. Again, that was a result on Saturday that, like you say, 1-0 up. They can't let that slip, and the manner of the goals that they conceded as well is poor. I don't think they've recruited very well. They've lost Sigurdsson, they've brought in kind of Boney, they've brought in Sam Klukas, Rocky Mesa, a player I've seen a lot of from Las Palmas, not really hit the ground running. They just look weak in a number of areas, but they did last season, and Clement did a fantastic job. It kind of went under the radar, I feel, last season, the job that he did, because it was really impressive. But has he got it up his sleeve this year to do it? I don't think so. I think they've obviously invested in Renato Sanchez, and that's not worked. So you're looking at it now, and not much what they've done this season has worked, basically. Tammy Abraham's not been had a bad return. But I don't know who Pulis supports, but he's obviously Welsh and he's available. I don't know if he's a Cardiff man or a Swansea man. He's one or the other generally, isn't it? So he's available. I think that will be weighing on the Swansea board's mind. He's not the Swansea kind of type of football, but will that slightly go out the window at Christmas if they're in the bottom three? Probably, to be honest.
Seems like a kind of a good fit, Pulis, doesn't it, back in Wales, and if he doesn't take the Welsh national job, because I can't think of any other sort of classic British managers that are available now that they've all seemingly come back in.
Well, Swansea have a very archetypal kind of manager, don't they? I'm not sure they would plumb for just any old name. If Pulis has got some kind of connection with them, I think that's a great call. But he is so far from where they've been the past few years. If you think of Laudrup, even as far back as Brendan Rodgers and Roberto Martinez, it'd be a huge shift for Swansea to do that. It would almost be a signal of them saying, right, we understand where we are now. We just need to stay up. They've lost that European ambition.
Yeah,
I agree with that. I just think now they've got the American owners, they might not look on it so kind of romantically and kind of they just look at the money and think we cannot get relegated. It's 120 million quid, and that's probably the biggest reason that will make them go for Pulis. I totally agree. It'd be a massive shift change away from what they've done and what they're all about. And but it's that question of can they play football and get out of the mess that they're in? Probably not. So they might have to just panic. And maybe, we're just seeing these short-term managers. It might be Pulis to the end of the season, keep them up, and then go back to what they know and want in the summer. I don't know. It seems to be that's the pattern that's emerging now.
Or could they lure a potential sort of up-and-coming European coach with the not unlimited funds, but a large transfer kitty in January to sort things out?
I think one of the problems you'd have with that, though, is essentially they did that last year with Clement, didn't they? Because I know that he was he Bayern Munich assistant manager at that point, or he was in the coaching staff. But that's essentially what they did. They went for a young up-and-comer that could play their way out of trouble. And that's not worked either. I mean, my personal belief is if they stuck with Clement and they went down, he'd probably scrub those decks. He'd get them back up. That's my opinion. I think he's a very good tactical manager, and he knows the Championship after being there with Derby. If I was Swansea, I'd probably, purely from a footballing perspective, I appreciate there's a business side that I'm not taking into account here. From a footballing side, I think I would look at Paul Clement and say, you know what, you're the best option we've got to bring us back up out of the Championship. But like Joel says, if they're thinking short-termism, and they're just thinking about keeping the Premier League money, then with Tony Pulis that'll work. I mean, that almost writes itself.
Yeah. I think you make a very fair point there, and it's Swansea sort of club that I'd like to see them stay up. I'd like to see them survive, but as you say, the recruitment does seem to have been a little bit wonky. One word in defence of Renato Sanchez: half a season underperforming at a club in the lower end of the Premier League does not make him a bad player. So for all those people slating him, have a little word with yourself. Before we move on, before we sort of leave the Premier League, there's two other games I do want to touch on very quickly. Leicester 1, Burnley 0 is not one of them, but that is another result which we should mention because it's a defeat for Sean Dyche and a winner for Damari Gray early on for Leicester. It's got them the points, but Josh, I want to touch on very briefly Everton. We kind of did them to death last week, so I really just want to focus on the Allardyce effect. First game for Sam Allardyce in this 2-0 victory over Huddersfield. Two questions for you, really. From an Everton perspective, is this going to be a marriage that will work? Because the fans seem to take it fairly well when he was employed. And from the other side of the coin, should Huddersfield start to be a little alarmed, given the fact that their slide down the table is seemingly on the way? They've lost their last 4 games.
Yeah, I think this was a appointment that I think Everton drastically needed, was someone that could throw in some kind of structure into this team, and I think we saw that from this particular game. He's only had 1 game in, but We saw Calvert-Lewin come in and play as a proper centre forward. I think he got a goal and an assist in the game for Sigurdsson, who'd come back in, and with Rooney playing in that midfield as well. I think overall he's done really well with the limited time that he's had with the club. I think the big thing that came from the game was obviously he's brought in Sammy Lee with him, who's got huge ties back to Liverpool, not only being a player but being on their coaching staff for well over a decade or so. And that's the point where Everton fans are a little bit, you're bringing the enemy into our club, and should we really get behind the manager? But Bill Kenwright came down when he was warming the subs up and gave him a big embrace, and I think that really helped the crowd kind of understand where they were, that although Sammy Lee's had this past, he's here to see Everton through a difficult situation. And to be honest, I would be surprised if he was there longer than the end of the summer, if whether or not he sorts them out, gets Everton into a decent mid-table position, perhaps push and get them into Europe with their position now in 10th, and them say thank you very much, but we've got aspirations that are slightly bigger than Sam Allardyce, and we see someone a bit like a Thomas Tuchel coming in to really build a legacy there.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those clubs that you could sort of see a manager like Tuchel potentially taking over in the summer. But we shall see. As I say, the Everton fans seem to warm to Allardyce, and that the Huddersfield thing. I hope they turn this run around, because they've been fun to watch, and they've had some tough fixtures of late, has to be said. But hopefully they get a win back under the belt sooner rather than later, because quite a big fan of their style of play. Final game of the weekend we want to cover. Of course, we have to cover this one, don't we, Ross? It's the South Coast derby that isn't a South Coast derby. What did you make of it? Bournemouth won, Southampton won. I felt Saints were quite unlucky not to come out of this with a win, particularly on the second half performance as a whole. Thought they were the better side. Did you concur?
I actually thought draw was about a fair result for me. I thought Bournemouth won the first half and Southampton won the second. Don't think we really matched them for intensity in the first half. First 15 minutes, Bournemouth started quite slowly, but I thought as soon as that period was gone, I thought Bournemouth looked a lot better. They took advantage of some of our sloppiness that did for the goal with Wesley Hoot trying a Cruyff turn and it all going a bit TU. For my money, I think a draw is a fair result. It's a good point for both sides. I just worry about what it is contextually for Southampton. Obviously, we had that defeat in midweek to Manchester City. Last minute goal, 97th minute, in the 7th minute of 5 minutes added on injury time. It's been a strange week. I mean, it feels like Pellegrino has reinforced some of the fans' belief in him. The win last week against Everton, a very, very good performance against Manchester City, arguably our best of the season, came within 30 seconds of actually getting a point off them. And then this one was probably the lowest point, this game against Bournemouth, but I still think there was enough about it to suggest we're going in the right direction. So I'm okay with how we've done in this game. I think a draw is fair. I just worry about what it's going to mean contextually by the time this horror run is over, because we have Arsenal next. I think we've got Chelsea coming up and Tottenham as well. So it's not a pretty December for us. And then Bournemouth, they've been not struggling this season, but certainly not been hitting their heights this season. It feels to me like Bournemouth is starting to feel like they're being rumbled by other teams. Other sides are turning up and are getting points when last season they weren't. Burnley certainly ground out a very good win during the week. It just feels like they're not hitting the standards they've met the past few seasons, and I wonder if that's, as Josh has been saying in the past, maybe the investment, maybe the transfers in just haven't been good enough for them this season, last season in particular. So I think on the balance of play, it's probably fair. In the context of the seasons, I think both sides will be relatively happy. As a Southampton fan, though, I'm just worried that this is a point that we couldn't really afford. I think we needed 3 just to be safe as we hit this horrible run we've got coming up. Yeah,
definitely a tough run upcoming, but I'm sure you'll find a performance against Arsenal, because you always do.
There was a disallowed penalty in that game as well.
If you're referring to Adam Smith,
yes,
it's not a penalty in a month of Sundays, because he is anticipating the contact and he goes down before any contact is made. If he'd stayed on his feet for half a second longer, Buffal would have touched him. It would have been a penalty, but he's dived over it. So No penalty.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing is that the referee apparently said to Adam Smith that he was wrong booking him for diving, which means Adam Smith now misses the next game because he's picked up 5 yellow cards.
Yeah,
and it can't be rescinded. So
if he's not booking him for diving, then he has to be giving the penalty, doesn't he? It's like one way or the other, surely. But
yeah.
Yeah.
So that's one of the bigger issues. But referees this week have certainly been
under the spotlight,
opening their mouths perhaps when they shouldn't be. Should we put it that way?
Yes.
One Mr. Clattenburg.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, that was. If anyone hasn't heard about that, do you want to just bring anyone to light on the comments?
Yeah. So Mark Lautenberg was on the Men in Blazers podcast. Don't listen to it; it's rubbish. Don't listen to any other football podcasts. We are the only podcast for football. But do give it a listen if you want. It is quite good. And they had an interview with Mark Lautenberg, who admitted that during the very tumultuous London derby of Chelsea versus Tottenham, that I think we remember from not last season, but the season before, with Leicester pushing for the title, and they absolutely capitulated, went mad, and Clattenburg admitted that he didn't send anyone off because he knew what the headlines would be, that he'd cost Spurs the title, when really them losing their heads was the real story, and he didn't want to get in the way of the media hype, so didn't send any players off, which when in that game you have a Dembele eye gouge and all sorts going off, they could have easily finished the game with at least 7 men on the field at the very least. It's a crazy thing for someone to admit, even just after the fact that they've done it. It's one of those secrets you should almost take to your grave, not broadcast on an American huge podcast, really.
Yeah, especially when other referees now will be called into question as to whether they think similar things, and they are a shrouded in mystery species, so to come out with that sort of thing, it is a little bit questionable, I think it's fair to say. But yes, do give that a listen after you've listened to us, of course. Right, we're going to stick with you then, Josh, as we move away from Premier League. We didn't have much League One or League Two this week because we had FA Cup and Championship action this weekend. So what's your roundup from the weekend that was in terms of Championship and, of course, FA Cup ties and third round draw, which has been announced tonight?
Yeah, so we'll start with the Championship because I think, some of the biggest stories, but we'll end with the biggest story, I think. Sunderland are still without a win. It's important. Chris Coleman's first home game there. They slumped to an unfortunate defeat again. Cardiff closed the gap on Wolves as well this weekend, but Wolves are playing at the moment, aren't they? I believe it's currently 0-0. They're playing Birmingham, so you'd expect that on paper Wolves will take their lead again, but Cardiff are currently 6 points clear of the playoffs, which for a Neil Warnock side, I don't think that was expected at the beginning of the season. And the final Championship game we want to talk about would be the Sheffield Wednesday Hull City game, which ended 2-2 and was big for the reason that Slutsky is now gone. I'll go to Joel on this first, I think. Slutsky's now gone. Are you now rejoicing in the streets of Hull? And who do you think is the next in line?
Well, if you listen to the reports, it's Nigel Adkins, which nobody wants. Safe to say, it's a really, really flat appointment, to be honest. I think on Slutsky, I think people are disappointed in terms of he's seemed a decent guy. Embraced the city, kind of the culture of the city, and kind of got involved with lots in the city. But on the field, it's been just a disaster. I know I've spoken about it in recent weeks, but it just couldn't go on. I think this Saturday was just an absolute classic Slutsky game at Hull. We took the lead, lost the lead, and then miraculously managed to get it back at the end, which for a 2-2 draw, which has not happened all season. But I think we've lost the most points from winning positions in the Football League. I think they've conceded 16 goals after the 80th minute. It's just been appalling. And there's a lot of the fans blame the owners for it, but I really don't. I just think he's just lost his way at Hull. I just think he's a good manager, but he's just doubted himself. He's changed the formation practically every game, changed the team every game. There's been no consistency. There's no style of play. So I think the next manager who comes in has got a relatively easy job because it's a decent group of players. I do think there's a good squad there. I believe it's top 10. When you look at the players that got to come back from injury, Abel Hernandez, Odebajo, Ryan Mason, there are good players there. But I just feel the aim is probably to stay in the league now, which is disappointing when there was a bit of optimism in the summer, which was to try and get back at the first attempt via the playoffs, I think was the aim. But I'm not so sure on Adkins. I'm sure others can fill me on Adkins, but it doesn't set the world on fire for me by any stretch of imagination. Largely because I think his last two jobs have been relative failures at Reading and Sheffield United. So is that the best Hull can get at this moment in time? So we'll wait and see. But I think they just need to get this season over with. And that sounds ridiculous in December, but it's just been a disaster up to now. So just staying in the league would be relative success, I think.
Yeah, I'd agree with everything there. A couple of other names that I think would be very interesting would be someone a bit like Derek McInnes, who's attracting a lot of attention up in Scotland.
Are you going to Rangers, though?
It's one of those that Rangers are making such a cock-up of their appointment that I'm not even sure if he's joining. But I think if someone organised came in and got in quick, I think that they could pick him up. Ross, do you have any thoughts on the whole situation? I know you'll be a big fan of Big Nige after his time down at the South Coast.
I love Nigel Adkins. I think his time's passed, but I love Nigel Adkins. I mean, what Nigel did for us in League One when he got promoted from League One and then through the Championship as well was absolutely fantastic. And I was desperate to see him go on and do well after he got sacked so unceremoniously by Cortese in favour of Pochettino. He then went to Reading and unfortunately had them at the back end of their Premier League stay and they went down. They didn't really recover in the Championship. Then he went to Sheffield United, where I thought, right, this is where he's going to rebuild his dynasty. He's going to come back up. Sheffield United it seemed a bit of a poison chalice. He couldn't get them back up. And since then, we haven't really heard about him. I think the last job I heard him linked with was the Eastleigh job in the National League. So I think he's a manager in regression, which is a real shame for a manager that did so well with Southampton. But you look at his work with us and with Scunthorpe, and there's enough in there to suggest that he can do a job for Hull. Unfortunately, I think if they went for him, I think that they would adopt him simply because he's a bit of a yes man, and he will work in tough conditions, and he will just stay positive, and he will bring a really brilliant attitude towards everything that's happening at Hull. But I think he will be there as a bit of a soft option for the board. But in terms of names I would throw into the hat for Hull, I mean, it might not be popular anymore, but I still think Phil Brown would be a brilliant fit for Hull at the moment, considering the direction they're heading in and the state they're in at the moment. I think, depending on how fans feel about him these days, I think he's a good fit after so many years away. Southend is where he's at the moment. He's built 4 years, I think. He's built a team there now. They're up in League One. He's got them promotion. He's got them on a solid footing. I don't think he'd be the worst option in the world, but I think a lot would depend on fan reaction to Phil Brown going back to Hull.
I think the fans, a lot of the fans would want him. Personally, I think the time's moved on from Phil Brown. I just think it's a long time since he was successful here. What is it? 2008, so it's nearly 9 years ago now. I don't know. The way it ended with Brown was not great either. Kind of from the middle point of the first Premier League season to him losing his job, I think we won about 5 games. So I think it just kind of is. I don't know. I wouldn't be that enamoured with that. I saw Paul Hurst was linked today. That might be a better shout than those two, I think. But in terms of, I know you say about Nigel Adkins being a yes man. Marco Silva wasn't a yes man. He was very demanding of the board, and the board did a lot for him. So I don't know if that's the fit that they want, just something to come in. Because I know we could go on about Hull all night, but there isn't a great deal happening off the pitch. It's blown out of proportion, a lot of it, in my opinion. There hasn't been any, strange decisions by the owner for a long time, but it just is lingering on. So we could do a full podcast about Hull, but we won't. But I just feel kind of the club's just lost its way massively. The owner needs to leave just because I think that's the right thing to happen, because he doesn't want to be there, but they can't attract a buyer. So it is just a nightmare scenario for everybody, to be honest. He doesn't want to be there. We don't have a manager, and the fans don't want the owner. So it's just a recipe for absolute disaster at the minute.
It's definitely a sticky situation, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, not ideal at the moment. But
No.
we should dip into the FA Cup. One of my favourite competitions, especially around now. You know, this was the second round that occurred this weekend, so third round draw coming up, and I'll go over a couple of those ties in a second and point out a couple where I could see giant killings occurring. But we'll start with AFC Fylde, who I believe we spoke about last week, or perhaps a couple of weeks ago, who played Wigan. They managed to get a 1-1 draw in that game, so they'll go to a replay midweek. Another game that also went to a replay, but an absolutely mad game, was the final 5 minutes of Forest Green Rovers versus Exeter City. A game which, 88 minutes gone, Exeter were leading 2-1 until the home side equalised. 4 minutes later, Forest Green Rovers then took the lead, only for Exeter to grab a 95th minute equaliser. So that game has gone to a replay. Again, that will be played sometime this week. We'll keep abreast of that, because they're two teams that are really interesting from the lower leagues, and hopefully pull out a decent tie for them to progress in the competition. Another team that also benefited from a late goal, Notts County, managed to win their tie in the 95th minute, courtesy of a George Grant goal to send the travelling Oxford City home fans disappointed, which is unfortunate for them. The third round draw was done this evening. Key ties I think have come out of that. We've got the M23 derby again. Brighton are going to host Palace, and also the Merseyside derby has also been pulled out. So a big test for Big Sam again, who's going to have host Liverpool in the third round. Two other ties that I think have got potential giant killing written on them. I'll go over to Ross and Joel for these, for which games, if you think a giant killing will happen here. Wolves versus Swansea. I'm not sure if this is a quintessential game, but you know, they're only a place above and below each other, with one topping the Championship and the other propping up the Premier League. But the other one that I think has got something in there, Newcastle Luton. What do you reckon to that one, Ross? I think Luton could do something here if Newcastle aren't going to take this competition seriously.
Yeah, I was going to say, if Rafa decides to rotate, then absolutely Luton have got a fantastic chance there. The one I look at, it's a bit cheeky on my behalf, but the one I look at is Manchester United derby, because Gary Rowett exceeds when he's away from home. That's where his style really comes into play. And I think, again, if Jose decides to rotate for that, I think Derby could be a side that will do a lot more damage than perhaps he's expecting. I wouldn't put my money on it just yet. I want to see the lineups first, and that's a little while away. But as soon as I saw that draw, I thought, man, if Jose doesn't take it seriously, then they're in trouble with Derby. But Luton, very good chance if Rafa rotates. And the one I think is nailed on, I know you've just mentioned it, but I think Wolves are almost certain to beat Swansea. I think that's a fantastic tie for them. Should give them a lot of encouragement for the rest of the Championship season. Unless something drastic has happened with Swansea between then, I don't see this current Wolves side losing to Swansea in their current guise. I'm watching them play Birmingham now, and they're just fantastic to watch, Wolves. So
cool, thanks. Chris, was there any other FA Cup ties that took your fancy, or do you want to dip into Europe?
No, I'm only just catching up on the draw myself now, and I think the Merseyside one is the obvious one. I see Arsenal are off to Nottingham Forest, which is I think it's a repeat of, was it last season or season before draw? So now I think it's there are a few ties. That Newcastle Luton tie is the other one that does jump out at me weirdly. Just think it's
Wimbledon
one of those
as well. Wimbledon away at Spurs.
Spurs, yeah, a classic old tie that is, isn't it? Yeah, and good money spinner for Wimbledon as well. Much needed cash. Ipswich, Sheffield United, Watford, Bristol City, first two out the hat as well. have the potential to be competitive games. QPR, MK Dons is another one that looks decent on paper. Manchester City hosting Burnley, you'd think that they'd probably get through that. Norwich hosting Chelsea. So yeah, I mean, even Fulham Southampton, Ross, might be a decent little watch.
Well, I'm going to try and go to that. It's what, an hour away from me in Reading. I'd love to go to Craven Cottage. So.
Yeah, proper old ground, isn't it? And as you say, I think Wolves Swansea, that's got I don't even know if it would be classed as an upset at the moment, but I think that's a good chance for Wolves to put Swansea out. So yeah, we shall see. But no, I'm happy with that, Josh. Thank you very much for covering, and as Ross quite rightly points out, in Championship wise, we've got Wolves playing Birmingham in the derby at the moment, and Wolves are currently a goal up and probably should be 3 up, to be honest. So looks like they are going to continue their charge up the Championship table. Or to the top of it, I should say. But we shall leave England behind then until we get to the questions, and we're going to move off into Europe. Just going to do a very, very quick tour or drop into Germany before we go to Joel and talk some Spain, because it wasn't a monumental weekend in Germany, but just to let you know some of the highlights. The Peter Bosz issue continues for Borussia Dortmund. A 1-1 draw away at Leverkusen, who had 10 men for the entire second half. They still couldn't break them down. Kevin Volland put Leverkusen in front. Dortmund equalised through Yarmolenko in the 73rd minute, but Wendell was sent off in the 41st minute, and they couldn't get the 3 points. So Bosz still under huge pressure. At time of recording, he's still in the job, but I don't know if that will last much longer. Freiburg and Hamburg played out a very sort of bitty 0-0 draw on the Friday night. Not much to say there. Bayern Munich beating Hanover 96 by 3-1. Arturo Vidal, Kingsley Coman and Robert Lewandowski were the goals there. Hoffenheim, probably the story of the weekend, smashing RB Leipzig 4-0. A couple of goals for Serge Gnabry, formerly of Arsenal, in that one, as well as Nedim Amiri and Mark Uth. So a very comprehensive victory for Nagelsmann's men. Werder Bremen getting a much-needed 3 points over Stuttgart with their 0-0. Max Kruse netting the winner there. Augsburg getting 3 points away at Mainz on the Sunday as well. On the Saturday, I should say. A 3-1 win there. Finn Bogerson with a couple of goals. And Cologne got a point. Who'd have thought? 2-2 draw away at Schalke. I don't think many people saw that coming. Schalke took the lead twice in that game, but Girassi, fresh off of his goal against Arsenal in the Europa League, got another couple. Yes, a point for Cologne, which I think they'll take gladly. And then on the Sunday games, the mighty Eagles of Frankfurt got a 2-1 victory over Hertha Berlin, which was a very, very good watch. That one, 2-1. Davy Selke put Hertha in front, but Wolf and Kevin Prince Boateng, the legend that is, got the winner for the Frankfurt Eagles. And Wolfsburg played Borussia Mönchengladbach in the final game of the weekend. They won 3-0. Don't think many people saw that coming either. A first clean sheet for Casteels for a long while. Yunus Mali, Daniel Jadavi and Joshua Gilavogi, who hit an absolute cracker to secure the points. 3-0 victory in this one. A couple of tasty VAR calls in that one, which didn't go in Gladbach's favour, but much needed points for Wolfsburg. That catapults them all the way up to 11th in the Bundesliga table, which you won't be surprised to know that Bayern Munich are starting to pull clear now, 6 points ahead of RB Leipzig, and Schalke both obviously dropped points this weekend, as indeed did Gladbach. Wasn't a very good weekend for the top sides, other than Hoffenheim. So that's just a very brief sort of tour around Germany. As I say, not too many sort of huge highlight games to pick up on there. I just wanted to give it a mention as always. And next weekend's fixtures, you got Dortmund against Bremen, should be worth a watch. Hamburg, Wolfsburg, Stuttgart, Leverkusen on Friday. Gladbach, Schalke is the evening game on the Saturday, and Bayern Munich away at Frankfurt. So some tasty looking ties there. So that is Germany for another week. Let's go off to Spain then, because we haven't had Joel for a little while. So Joel, I'm going to give you an opportunity to talk about anything you wish to talk about in a second. But just before I do, let's talk about your beloved Barcelona and the title race as a whole, because it's fair to say since we had you on last time, it's all changed. Well, it hasn't all changed, but there's been a few changes. Valencia rather surprisingly losing this weekend. Barca held to a draw, but Real Madrid couldn't take advantage. And a certain record for Sergio Ramos. So tell us all about how Barca are getting on and the title race in general for recent weeks.
Yeah, the title race it was a big weekend for it this weekend. I don't think anyone saw it coming on kind of Friday when the game started off, but it ended up being kind of a kind of important weekend in, I think, one that people will look back on. Barca kind of out of the top team started on Saturday afternoon at 12 o'clock, our time kickoff, and played well actually. Played well against Vigo, drew 2-2. Probably the best they've played at home this season, but weirdly, 1-0 down on the counter attack. Then Messi pulled a goal back, but it was Barcelona kind of not at the best, because I think they're way off the best, but it was a lot better and a lot more encouraging. They were creating chances. Suarez looked a lot sharper, but Celta Vigo were resilient, and then Suarez scored in the second half. And then Vigo scored to make it 2-2. It was an unfortunate goal Barca conceded, because Umtiti chased Aspas down the wing into the channel and ended up rupturing his hamstring. So he had to stop running, and Aspas just crossed for Maxi Gomez to equalise. So it was 2 points dropped for Barca at that point, and you thought kind of this is, it wasn't looking good with the fixtures that were coming up over the weekend. Atletico Madrid were up next. They got an 88th minute winner against Sociedad to win 2-1. Griezmann partnered with Gamero, which has seen an upturn in Atletico Madrid's form these last few weeks. Griezmann was drifting massively this season, but that change of position for him has dropped a little bit deeper. Gamero's operating more up front, probably where Costa's going to operate come January, and Griezmann looked a lot better for it, and obviously got the winner. So again, I was sat there thinking everyone's going to win but Barca this weekend. And then next up was Madrid away at Bilbao, and such is Madrid's season. They drew 0-0. Didn't hit the post twice, but didn't really look massively in control of the game, didn't really look like they were going to win the game. And it's such a massive drop-off from Real Madrid this season. I did think they would have turned the corner. I thought when they lost to Spurs, that would have been it, but it's kind of carried on. And although they beat Malaga last week, it was nowhere near convincing, and it was only 3-2 at home against Malaga, who I think had scored one goal away all season. So it tells you everything as to where Madrid's at. And they're constantly letting Barcelona off the hook. Barcelona would have been really kind of annoyed at the points dropped earlier in the day, and then Madrid go and draw 0-0. And then obviously yesterday afternoon, Valencia, unbeaten all season, lose at Getafe. A 10-man Getafe as well. I watched the game, and Getafe were valued for the points. So as the game's finished over the weekend, Barcelona looked at it and gone, well, we're one game down. We've dropped points, but we're not going to do every week, and we're one game closer to the title. Valencia have lost. The gap to them is 5 points, 6 points to Atletico Madrid, and 8 points to Real Madrid. I think the title is Barcelona's to lose. Obviously, given the points difference, it's fairly obvious. They are lacking something. I think they're lacking Dembele, and they're lacking another player. They're lacking something in midfield. Whether that's Coutinho or not in January, I don't know. But I think it's going to hamper them. Obviously, Umtiti's out now for 2 months with a ruptured hamstring, which isn't great considering the options they've got at the back. That brings Vermaelen in to partner Piqué, because Mascherano's injured. And they may look at bringing a centre-half in January. I think Mascherano's itching to get away just because he's not getting the minutes that he needs. So they will look to recruit in January. Whether they can do it or not is kind of classically difficult, isn't it? Because not many teams want to sell, and players are cup tied for the Champions League as well. So that's potentially where the Ozil link came from. I don't think there's anything in that, to be honest. Just that it won't be cup tied for the Champions League. So I think as it stands, Barca are in a good place. Madrid are in an absolutely awful place, and I don't know where that's going to turn. Zidane's talking that they need goals, which is just crazy when you look at the creative talent they've got in the team. Ronaldo's got 2 league goals all season. Guillaume Balaguer said a stat today, and I couldn't work out whether he meant in the game or he meant all season, but either could be true. He said Benzema and Ronaldo have not passed to each other. I don't know whether he meant in the season or in the game on Saturday. But if that's in the season, that's just unbelievably odd. That 2 players up front have not once made a successful pass to each other all season. So the root of the problem lies in the fact that they are just under the weather massively, and they've got the Club World Cup, which is not a great distraction for them. They will probably look to recruit in January, but again, who they're going to bring in? It sounds odd, but they're missing Morata. and they're missing him coming off the bench. Asensio's dropped his levels, and the rest have just dropped the levels 3 or 4 notches. Yeah, the title race is a weird one this season. It kind of doesn't feel as competitive as it has done in recent years. Now, Atletico Madrid are coming up on the rails, to be honest, and they are the one to watch from a Barcelona perspective. I feel Valencia have done unbelievably, and they are in the title race. I just don't know whether we'll get more of what we got yesterday, where they might come a little unstuck, and they don't have great depth in the squad.
It's I'll tell you the one thing I wanted to bring up, because I've tried to catch up on a few games recently. I very much enjoyed the Villarreal Sevilla game last weekend. I want to chuck that in. But there was an incident in the Eibar Espanyol game. Did you see this? The penalty that Jordan scored on the 69th minute?
I didn't see that one, Chris. No.
Well, let me tell you. There was basically it was I be honest, I don't know which players were involved, so I'll hold my hands up now. But there was an incident where there was a high hanging ball into the penalty area, and one of the defenders went to clear the ball, sort of somewhat acrobatically. His foot was high. He swung for the ball, missed the ball completely, but the centre forward for Espanyol went down like he'd been shot, claiming that he'd been caught in the face. And it was so convincing. I think Jerry Armstrong on the commentary was sort of suggesting, I think it might have been Sergio Garcia that went down, possibly, I could be wrong, but suggesting that it was such a convincing act that he was convinced he'd been kicked in the head. And the penalty was given, duly dispatched by Sergei Enrique. And there's a lot of controversy coming off the back of that. And of course, we saw the Barcelona no goal last week at Valencia as well. Does this put even more pressure on La Liga? I mean, I'd encourage you to look this up, because there's no contact at all on the face. And whilst you could give it dangerous play, there's a clear foot between where the player's boot goes and the face. And it's blatant cheating. So is this a case that La Liga now has to not only, I mean, I know they're getting VAR next season, but surely they've got to take steps to put everything in place to stop these sort of things happening now?
Well, yeah, and I think they're just kind of behind with everything, and they're just behind with the goal line technology, and obviously they're panicking now and trying to get VR in. I have heard a number of things over the last week that it's expensive to bring it in, and they don't know who's going to pay for it. So the La Liga, the BBVA, have just said basically we're not keen on funding it. So that raises a question as to who is going to fund, 1, the goal line technology, and 2, VAR. So they need to do something, because it's far too important a league. There's far too many big players, big teams. They're trying to raise it to the level of the Premier League, and you're getting absolutely ludicrous decisions like the one you just described, and just ones where the ball's crossing the line, by a good foot, and they're not giving it. It just is making the league look amateur in that respect, when other leagues, leading leagues in the world, have got the technology in place. In my opinion, what will happen is they'll knee-jerk, bring it all in for next season. I don't think it'll work properly, and you could end up with more of a farce than you're currently getting, because they're absolutely panicking to get it in. But something, you're right, you're completely right, something does need to happen for this, completely.
Doesn't the Australian A-League have VAR and goal line technology?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
How can they afford it and not La Liga then?
Exactly.
I find that a bizarre claim to make from the Spanish FA. Because, I mean, the Championship's swimming in a lot of money, don't get me wrong, but that's got goal line technology. If that can have it, surely the league can.
Well, yeah, exactly.
And surely they could get it sponsored or something, couldn't they? Just appeal and say, look, we want to get it in. So
it's arguably the biggest league in the world. If it's not it's the second. I can't see how you can justify the claim that they can't afford it. If that's the excuse they're running with, that seems a very weak reason.
Yeah, it's odd. It's very odd.
Yeah, it is very odd, and certainly one that will, I'm sure will come up again. I'm sure it isn't the last of the controversial incidents. And yeah, if you get a chance, Joel, in fact, if you get a chance before the end of the show, I'll come back to you at the end and you can tell me what you think of the incident. It's bizarre. But just before we leave, Sven, obviously I'll give you an opportunity to speak about anything you want to speak about. The only other thing I wanted to just ask you was the 2 Madrid clubs. You kind of touched on there. Is it, regardless of what happens, because obviously we're sat here on the 4th of December, a lot can happen, both could win the Champions League, for example. But at the end of this season, is there going to be quite a lot of change at both Madrid clubs, whether in terms of managerial, players, structure, the whole thing? Because they both strike me as two clubs that I haven't even enjoyed watching them this season. And I can't remember the last time I said that, particularly about Real Madrid. They just both look like clubs that are really in transition. So do you think there's big changes ahead for them?
I think to start Atletico Madrid, I think there'll be changes on the playing side, not the management side. I don't think Simeone will leave. I think he'll stay. I think he's committed to staying. I think you'll see a change on the playing side for them in terms of Griezmann will definitely leave. As to where, is Barcelona really keen on him. United are really keen on him, and so are PSG. I think he's got to choose where he wants to go, to be honest. But he'll definitely leave, and a couple of others may leave. But I think Simeone will stay. But I think they need to make that transition post Griezmann and kind of build the team around Costa and whoever they get to replace Griezmann. They've also got Vitolo to come in January as well, who will assist. But I think he's picked up quite a serious injury playing for Las Palmas. For Real Madrid, I think there will be a massive change in players brought in. If not in January, in the summer completely. They've cut themselves the cloth way too short this last summer. I think they thought the young players that they had were at a significantly higher level than they've proved to be. I think the inconsistency is something which has killed them. So the likes of Asensio, Lucas Hernandez, Theo Hernandez, Denis Ceballos, who they've bought for 18 million from Betis, is not figured whatsoever. So they've left themselves really short in terms of a squad. So they'll address that as quickly as they can. I don't think there'll be a managerial change. I think they'll keep faith with Zidane. I think unless a really good manager becomes available, I don't see who would take that job. I mean that in sense of I can't think who's available to take the job. So I think they'll stay with Zidane and give him these two transfer windows to bring in players. Although it won't be him buying the players, it'll be Florentino Perez. But you take my point. I think he'll get backing. And I think you potentially could see Bale leave next summer. It depends if they want to sell him as opposed to whether he wants to stay or not. I think the decision was made for him. I think it depends on who they can look to bring in. But I think you're right. I think they're drifting. Real Madrid more than Atletico Madrid. I think Atletico Madrid, since the change formation, have brought themselves on a more of an even keel, to be honest. And they look a lot better playing 4-4-2 with somebody alongside Griezmann. Yeah,
it does seem like it's going to be a big summer for both. Anything else in Spain that's sort of on the tip of the tongue?
That obviously Berizzo, the manager of Sevilla, diagnosed with cancer a couple of weeks back. That was announced. He's obviously not. He's having treatment at the minute. The signs are that it's gone really well, and he'll be back after Christmas. They picked up another victory on Saturday, so which is really positive news for him and for everyone kind of connected at Sevilla. Other news are that Las Palmas have sacked Paco Arestian on Thursday last week, and then they went and won. So they're now on to the third coach of the season. Well, they haven't appointed one yet, but it will be the third manager this season, which is odd in itself. They kind of haven't recovered from Quique Setien leaving, going to Betis, where he started really well, and now he's struggling. So that's kind of where we're at in terms of Spain this weekend. Next weekend, there's some really big fixtures, actually. You've got Madrid versus Sevilla at the Bernabeu, 3:15 on Saturday. Celta Vigo, Valencia on Saturday night, 7:45 game. And then on the Sunday, there's a big game with Villarreal against Barca. Barca don't have a great record at El Madrigal, so there's some big weekends next season. I think next weekend could, if the results go a different way or one way or another, you could see Barca take a massive stride towards the title next weekend. Looks quite pivotal, especially with Madrid being away the week after, so they could, in theory, be 14 points clear by the time they play again. So it's a big weekend next weekend. Yeah, that Christmas Classico is looming large, isn't it? Absolutely. Sorry, I keep thinking that's after Christmas. They brought it forward on the 23rd, haven't they? Yes, that's at the Bernabeu, so that could, I think that'll be a draw, to be honest. Yeah, certainly. I think they're going to get quite big viewing figures for that one. Bigger than 12 o'clock, isn't it? Oh, is it? Oh, okay. Interesting. Yeah, is that on a what? I don't know what day that is. That's on a Sunday, isn't it? 23rd is a. Oh no, it's a Saturday. Saturday at 12 o'clock. So atmosphere-wise, it may hinder that game, to be honest, because the early ones in Spain particularly don't seem to be very atmospheric in the slightest.
No. We will be across it regardless, of course, as you would expect us to be. Okay, good stuff. Well, that's about. I think we've got a couple of questions that may well touch that way to come, so I will save those for you. We are still awaiting Lana to join us, so we're going to talk a little bit of Italy first of all, and save France for Lana. So let's have a little natter about what happened in SerieA this weekend. Josh, we can start only one place, really, can't we? The mighty Benevento. I'm sure everyone knows what happened, but we should probably recreate was it the 93rd minute? To picture the scene. Obviously, it's the first game of the season or first managerial game of the season for Rino Gattuso in charge of AC Milan. Bonaventura had put them in front. Puskás rather surprisingly equalised before Kalinic put Milan back in front. Romagnoli was sent off into the 3rd minute stoppage time. Still 2-1 to the away side. They got a free kick on the left-hand side, about 40 metres from goal. Swung in, hopeful-looking ball. Up rises a man all in green, which may give away that, in fact, it's not an outfield player. It's actually the goalkeeper, Brignoli, who doesn't just head in the equaliser to amazing scenes, but it's a diving header. It's a wonderful moment, a wonderful goal. And although it's only 1 point, they have got a point. So did you see this, Josh? What I mean, it's one of those, isn't it? You think you've seen everything in football, but then that happens.
Yes, I did indeed. They finally put pay to that 15 losses in a row they had that had
14,
beaten.
I think, or is it? No, yeah, 14 in a row. And
14,
this is their 15th game. Yeah,
which had beaten all other records at the beginning of seasons for domestic football, so in top flight anyway. But yeah, what a fantastic scene to finally say. I think Gattuso perhaps overreacted with his post-match comments on the game, which said it would have been. He said it would be better to have been stabbed.
Yes.
Than to
slight overreaction.
than to concede a goal in such a way. But you can't begrudge them one bit. Benevento, they're coming in here. The goalkeeper, I believe, is on loan from Juve. So whether or not that just adds an added bit to the whole situation, but yeah, fantastic result for them, and very happy for them to have finally got some points on the board. Yeah,
or just the one, but even that seems like an achievement for them, doesn't it? And the scenes after the goal, incredible, really was something you very rarely see at this level in terms of passion about a draw. But a goalkeeper scoring. Ross, I don't know if you may not have seen this, but I'm sure you'd be aware of the result. The big game of the weekend was on the Friday night. Roma were beat Spal 3-1 on the same night. We should point that out. So they kept up the pressure in an amazing title race. But we saw an old favourite come back to haunt the San Pauli as Napoli lost at home to Juventus. Lana's best mate Gonzalo Higuain getting the winning goal. Rather surprised to see this end 1-0 Juve. Did you maybe expect it to be a bit more, not goal-filled as such, but a bit more exciting, a bit more sort of on the edge of your seat? It's unlike Napoli not to score at home, for example. So is this quite a significant result, and does this only go to show that Juve are not yet out the title race and maybe Napoli's still got a way to go?
Well, I've got to be honest. Most of what I learn from SerieA is what I hear from you guys and from observing the table and this sort of thing. So I wouldn't have gone into this weekend expecting anything in particular from Juventus versus Napoli in terms of the form, in terms of how many goals they should or shouldn't be scoring. I think given the context of the title race and given the context of how tight the table is, I don't think it's a massive shock to suggest that game may have been more conscientious. They may have just been trying to get something from it, and both sides too afraid to concede ground to one another. I have absolutely loved the look of the SerieA table this season, and if it wasn't for persistent internet problems, I would be endeavouring to watch more of it this year as I did Liga last year. The table this year in SerieA is absolutely fantastic. Just to look at some of the teams that are clumped in near the top of the table. And of course, you have a team like Benevento, who are fantastic quality, even though they are one of, if not the worst top flight teams in the history of Europe. They bring in this incredible added flair to SerieA. So it's a wonderful league this year, and the title race is by far and away the most interesting one in Europe for me. Napoli versus Juventus is a big game just by names, but to have that on a Friday night as well, to be able to lead your weekend's fixtures with that, I think is another coup for SerieA. I think it's a sign that it's a league that's going in the right direction. But the title race in general, I mean, I saw the table last week and I thought, well, that's a ridiculous top 6. I look at it now and it's still a ridiculous top 5. I know Lazio picked up a win as well, didn't they, this weekend, to keep the pressure on 4th. It's a brilliant top half this season, and games like Juventus versus Napoli are going to be absolutely pivotal to not just the two teams involved in that match, but the teams in the title race on the whole. So if that game was a bit nervier, if it was a bit more cagey, I suspect you're going to see a few of those this season among the top table. Like I say, I think there's going to be a lot of understanding from all these teams that it's not just about what these points mean for you. It's also about what these points could mean for the rest of the division. You've got to be banking on someone else slipping up here, or maybe you think someone's going to get a win there. So now you've got to make sure you get something from this game. I think there'll be a lot more tactic in the top half for some of those teams, and it doesn't overly shock me to hear that this big fixture wasn't an all-out, knock-em-out, drag-em-out brawl, where it may have been a bit more conscientious and defensive and tactical.
Yeah, well said. And it was a quintessential kind of Italian-style top-table clash, which also, Josh, we should mention the leaders of Serie A now, with Napoli's defeat, 5-star Inter Milan. It's all going on there, isn't it, for a team John and I follow quite closely. All of a sudden, it's all clicking into gear. As you say, a 5-0 win. The pick of the goals against Chievo at the San Siro was probably Skriniar's goal, which was a proper old-fashioned cross from I think it's Candrava's cross from the right, and a stooping diving header at the back stick from Skriniar to, at that point, make it 4-0, and Ivan Perisic hat-trick, and that man Icardi also on the score sheet. Inter, it sounds silly to say in the title race, Josh, but have they got the staying power? 39 points for 15 played, point clear of Napoli, 2 clear of Juve. Is this their opportunity now?
It certainly looks like that. I'll apologise to the other side of Milan, who I said would definitely challenge in the title race this season after their summer business, but looks like I picked the wrong half. Inter looked absolutely phenomenal. It's incredible that they're so open for an Italian side. It's kind of changed across the years. We've seen it now with Napoli, who play very expansive football. But to have a player like João Mario sitting in a 2 with Borja Ferreiro, it's really nice to see that we've got this kind of added football. You've got Perisic getting a hat-trick in this game as well, that just really shows they can get goals from anywhere around the field now, and they're not having to be overly reliant on Icardi, which I think they have done in previous seasons. But again, whether or not he'll get tempted, probably not in January, but as we've alluded to already, there's going to be a lot of big clubs looking to shake up their attacking lineup, and is Mario Icardi one of those players that could be swayed to another division? I don't think he'd move into another team within Serie A, but I think they're certainly up for a shout here, and with anybody being able to challenge Juve, I think it's all good for the league and can only help Serie A have that kind of renaissance and get back to that height it had in the mid-90s.
Yes, the James Richardson era, if you will, Football Italia and all that jazz. It's definitely shaping out to be a very, very close title race. As Ross pointed out, Lazio winning the last-minute winner from Felipe Caicedo, who Joel will remember well, possibly. Maybe not so well. Where was it? He played in? It's Man City, wasn't it? He played
Man
for
City. That's where I remember him from.
The UK, yeah. Say again, Joel.
He was at Espanyol in Spain.
Yes, of course he was. Yes, yeah. Because he did quite well, didn't he, in Spain? That's kind of where he had a bit of a renaissance after leaving City. Big, powerful forward. He got the last-minute winner after Linkovic-Savic had equalised Zapata's opener for Sampdoria. So, Yeah, Lazio definitely on the climb. They're up to 5th. Rome with their win up to 4th. Other results in Serie A this weekend. We saw Atalanta win last weekend, I think, when we were recording against Benevento, so I think we know about that one. Fiorentina winning 3-0 over Sassuolo. Another goal for Simeone's son there, along with Jordan Veretout and also Chiesa's son. So all the youngsters, all the young sons of legend scoring there. Udinese won earlier on this evening by 3-0 in Crotone. A couple of goals from Yankta there, and one from Kevin Lasagna. I'm sure it was a tasty finish. Boom. And Bologna drawing 1-1 with Cagliari, as João Pedro's opener cancelled out by Matteo Destro in that one. And Torino sporting a Chapecoense tribute green kit, drawing 1-1 with Atalanta on Saturday. Ilicic equaliser from Nkulu's opener for Torino. We've also got a game in progress at the moment, which is Hellas Verona hosting Genoa, currently 0-0, just approaching half-time in that one. So obviously no scores there. So that was the weekend that was in Serie A. All things are getting close there. We're going to take a little trip into Ligue 1 now, and I'm hoping I can bring Lana in fairly shortly. So before I do, I should just sort of go over the games that I'm sure she's not as fussed about. So we, I think probably the big story of the weekend we might save, which is the PSG game, as they played Strasbourg. But we did see some quite significant results sort of lower down the table. Ross, still no news on Bielsa in terms of Lille. They've won 2 on the bounce. They've won against. They won rather surprisingly midweek against Lyon. It's probably a good job we didn't mention that while Anna was on. And they won again this weekend with a 1-0 victory over Toulouse. It seems obvious that Bielsa's going to go. As I say, at the time of recording, I don't think it's actually been made official, even though he's still kind of not there, as it were. Do we sort of suspect that things will run a bit more smoothly? And is that the reason why these results have come to on the bounce? Because he's not been around, do you think?
Maybe. I think I said this last time, but I think Bielsa's methods and the way he treats players these days, I don't think fits in with the modern footballer. So I wonder if a new manager or even just an interim coach going in there and just kind of letting them be themselves a bit more, and treating them, I was about to say treat them a bit nicer. Maybe that's a simplified way of saying it, but you understand my point. To maybe give them a bit more space and a bit more room. Maybe that freedom is just what it took. You know, maybe it's Bielsa's training methods, or it's just the way he is around the players. I'm not sure, but it's clear that as soon as he's gone, there seems to be a certain level of freedom, and I've caught little bits of them here and there. Saw a little bit of the first half against Toulouse, and they looked a lot more fluent than they did under Bielsa. So I don't want to keep heaping all this criticism on Bielsa because he's a brilliant manager who's done fantastic things for the game. But for me, I think that he's a manager that's kind of outlived his usefulness in terms of managing full time, especially a side full of so many youngsters. That is the Lille project at the moment. So I think a change of manager, whenever it does come, I think it's going to be hugely refreshing. I know that there's rumours that Bielsa has already gotten prepared a lawsuit for unfair dismissal. If it comes off, it could get messy. But I think on the fields, I think Lille will be revolutionised by losing Bielsa and possibly picking up someone like Oscar Garcia, who's obviously now out of a job after leaving Saint Etienne. Yes,
indeed. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And Saint Etienne, mentioning them, they got a 1-1 draw this weekend against Nantes in there's a rather interesting clip of Claudio Ranieri, who, let's just say, was not particularly chuffed about a challenge on Rongier in that game. He audibly was not pleased. Just leave it at that. It's on Twitter if you want to find it. Right, let's see if Lana's with us. On the move in snowy Scandinavia, I think, but we can hopefully bring her in now. Lana, are you with us?
Hey guys.
Yes, she is. There she is. Out of breath. Is it cold and snowy where you are?
I think I just lost a kidney. Oh my god.
How was work? Was it a pleasant evening?
It was horrible. I hate people.
Good. Well, let's talk about some people you like then. We've saved the best for you. Caen 1, Lyon 2 at the weekend.
Yes.
Another victory for Lyon, who now go to second in the table with that result. How did you find it? It was a bit nervy at times, wasn't it? And there was a few things that could have maybe got in their favour, particularly a non-sending off, shall we say. But yes, good win for Lyon. What did you reckon?
Oh yeah, as you said, it was a good win, but we were so defensively shaky at times, which was so surprising to see considering how well we've done in the last 8 games, where we've only conceded 3 goals against Lille, but let's not talk about that game.
We skipped over that.
Yeah, but before that we kept a clean sheet in our 7 last games, so it was a bummer to see them score. They could have even equalized. We were so lucky. Lopez had some great saves. So overall, I'm really happy. Fekir got a bit of stick because it feels like, I almost feel bad for saying it, but they were doing better, playing more fluidly in those 2 games without him than they are now. It sort of reminds me of when Lacazette used to play, because everything goes through him, and the same way it goes with Fekir. But take them out, the team is more fluid, giving other players the, opportunity to shine.
Mr. Sitter as well, didn't he, Fekir late on? And do you think Marcelo, I think it was Marcelo, was very lucky not to see red with his exchange with the linesman? I don't know if it had
Oh my God, yeah. I like the fact that that Montpellier guy got sent off for less.
Oh, we'll come on to that.
Yeah, and Marcelo got away. I was holding my eyes in shock. I was like, oh no, that's a red card. That's a red card. We're so screwed. But the ref was like, just gave him a warning and walked away. I was like, yep, this is a totally match-fixed game. Yep.
It was nuts.
Yeah, because he pushed him and got in his face.
He put his hand in his face, didn't he? He sort of shoved him away. You just wouldn't get away with that anywhere else, I don't think, but France.
No. And we haven't heard anything from the French Federation either, whether it's going to be, I almost said a penalty, whether it's going to be punishment or not, but we'll probably hear something during the week if the ref decides to put it in his report.
Yeah, that will be the interesting bit. We shall see whether that comes about. Okay, let's talk about a couple of other games. I've saved PSG for you. They played away at Strasbourg. Strasbourg, who less than 2 years ago, were in the 3rd tier of French football, and they went and beat mighty PSG. Their first defeat of the season. Neymar copped a lot of flack. Their unbeaten record is gone. Amazing result, including they even gave them 9 minutes of stoppage time to equalise, and they still couldn't find it. Massive result for Strasbourg, though, isn't it? Let's give them credit.
They were amazing. I mean, full credit. This is the thing that I really dislike. I think it happens in all the leagues, but when, a small team beats a big team, the focus is on the big team rather than giving full credit to the actual team that beat them. The same case was with Benevento Milan at the weekend. The credit didn't go to Benevento for actually securing the first point of the season, but it went to Milan and their crisis. And that's the similar thing here as well. It was more focused on Neymar and Mbappe than it was on Strasbourg actually beating, PSG, which was a great result. They were defensively superior to PSG, who I still think, need a new defense. Midfield as well. The only standout player in that PSG team, in my opinion, is Rabiot. And they seriously need a whole new midfield because you cannot rely on Thiago Motta and Verratti, I don't think he's been good for a long time. And Neymar again gets stick for just being a major douchebag. No offense to Neymar fans, not that I care because he's a major douchebag. And Mbappe as well. I talked about it before. His arrogance. I just don't see how he thinks he can behave the way he does when he's achieved nothing so far. And it just genuinely bothers me that he's going to turn out to be like a mini version of Neymar.
Does seem to be a slightly different player actually. Why is that PSG? It does make you wonder.
Yeah, because you can see it in his whole attitude on the pitch. And, we give Cavani a lot of stick, But he was the one player that actually showed respect to Strasbourg. And even the coach afterwards talked about it, how he didn't like PSG and they're a team of arrogant players. There were also the Troyes manager last week, I think.
Yeah.
Who asked for Cavani's shirt because he was the only one that had actually showed the team and the players and the coach respect.
Yeah, he took a shirt,
yeah, we can give him a lot of stick for being the way he is, but at least he shows that level of humbleness, which you would love to see in someone like, Mbappe and Neymar and the others.
Neymar there. Can I just come in on Neymar? I think it's interesting with Neymar because this is what he wanted, isn't it? He wanted to be the main man in a team, in a big team, and lead the team himself. So it's interesting to see how he reacts now because previously, he's had this with Brazil, but Barcelona, whenever the team didn't win, it was never solely his fault. But now he's taken this mantle on. He's going to be a challenge for him to kind of to bear all the kind of criticism. It's all going to fall on his door.
Yeah, because he hasn't received. I haven't read a single positive review about him.
Yeah, and I think this is kind of the rough with the. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of smooth playing for PSG in his standard, but there's going to be some rough, and he's going to feel the full kind of brunt of it, whereas everybody else won't. And at Barcelona, it was kind of Messi's problem when the team didn't win, not Neymar's. Now he's got to fight this on his own, which is interesting. Yeah,
because he can't hide behind Cavani because he's took Cavani's duties, and I think that he thought that he could come in and be almost like the new Zlatan, but the way Zlatan, came in, did his thing, he didn't just impress on the pitch, but off. And so far, there's only been negativity around Neymar, and it rubs off on other players. And my big worry, as I said before, is Mbappe. Because if you watched him last season for Monaco, and then you see him this season, just the way he is, it just frustrates me. And I genuinely worry because I would hate to see such a good player be tainted by his arrogance and his attitude. Because that's a, common factor between some young French players. But we've seen less and less of it. But now when we see with Mbappe, who's like the next big thing, I'm like, okay, someone needs to come and give this kid a reality check and just kick the shit out of him. Hopefully that could be me.
It was definitely a huge result, and so we'll give the credit to Strasbourg. Couple of other results before we touch on one final game. Monaco with a 1-0 win over Angers. Radamel Falcao with the winner there. Nice getting a much-needed 3 points as they beat Metz at home. Not a big surprise that, but goals from player Saint-Maximin and Balotelli. A 3-2 victory for Dijon over Bordeaux on Friday night. Rather surprising somewhat, especially as Bordeaux led twice in that game, but Jeannot and Saye with the winning goals there to make it a big win for Dijon. And Troyes losing at home to Guingamp by a 1-0, and Rennes beating Amiens 2-0 at home, one goal from Wabi Kazri in that one as well. And the only other game I've got to mention is the Sunday evening game between Montpellier and Marseille. This was a game, it ended in a 1-1 draw, but Lana, this was one of those games that had tinges of controversy at both ends of both halves. Notably, a penalty given against the Montpellier captain, whose name completely escapes me, the old chap. Helton, thank you, which was never a penalty in a million years. And then the same player, Helton, involved in running across the line of Steve Mandanda in stoppage time, which ruled out what appeared to be a headed winning goal.
He didn't touch it. I've replayed that incident probably 15 times. No one judge me, please. But it was just so I could actually genuinely have something to fire back at the Marseille fans.
Yeah, I mean, is there an argument, though, that he runs across the line of sight for Mandanda? Because, I mean, the Montpellier players were away and celebrating. They were ready to kick off again, weren't they? They thought the goal was given. And then the referee, as I say, already given a penalty, which I just can't see how that is a penalty, is kicked straight at him and his hands are down by his side.
It's not a penalty. The thing is with Marseille and their pathetic excuse of fans is that they think they have this sense of entitlement to get what they want because they have this lovely ability to think that they're the victim of League One when everyone knows they're the most beloved team in France. They're the one team, barring PSG, that gets the most coverage, yet their fans are actually making excuses for why the penalty was given. But 9 out of 10 times, that the player will get a booking for diving and never a penalty. And the fact that Montpellier's second goal was disallowed because Hilton touched it, when the replay showed that he was nowhere near it, that should have been a goal, and Montpellier should have gotten away with all 3 points. And now it just bothers me because Marseille are level on points with us, and just that we have a superior goal difference. But it's just so shocking to see that poor level of refereeing from the ref, because that game should be replayed the way the decisions went Marseille's way. They never should have gotten away with the point. They robbed Montpellier of 3 clear points.
Yeah, I really did think it was pretty shocking officiating, I have to say. And nothing will be done, of course, but it really, really was just terrible. If you haven't seen it, it's worth looking up.
By the way, even more terrible performance than the ref is Dimitri Payet's.
Oh, he was awful, wasn't he?
Yeah, and now there's talks about him and Giroud being the 2 that's most likely to not get called up for next summer for the World Cup. Payet, hasn't been a player for the last 12 months, but Giroud, that's unfair because he's actually good for France. But yeah, Dimitri Payet is at huge risk for not going to the World Cup, because yesterday as well, he got a 3 in L'Équipe today because of his poor performance.
Yeah, he really was absolutely awful in that game. Just had no effect on it whatsoever. Shadow of the player that of all teams West Ham sold on. It's bizarre how that has happened. But nevertheless, some West Ham fans would say karma. I don't know whether I would, but hey ho. All of those results basically mean that PSG are still top of the table and away and clear, but Lyon now up to second, Monaco up to third, and Marseille falling to fourth. Metz, Angers and Toulouse are in the bottom 3 slots. Looks like Metz are gone, and then you've got a little bit of a cluster of teams: Lille, Strasbourg, Troyes, Guingamp, Nice and St Etienne and Bordeaux, all within 4 points of each other. So it's pretty close at the bottom of Liga, with some big fixtures to come, of course, ahead of the winter break, which is starting to loom quite large for our leagues. We'll have very short shows, won't we, during the winter periods? Big sigh of relief, says everyone. Next weekend's probably big fixture is Marseille and St Etienne on Sunday night. That'd probably be worth tuning in for, and PSG Lille might also be worth a look. And Lana, you're off to Amiens with Lyon on Sunday afternoon, so that'll be worth keeping tabs
That's
on.
an incoming loss for us.
Yeah.
They seem to show up against big teams.
Big teams, yeah, agreed. Yeah, they have been doing that all season. Right, okay, that is our look around England and abroad then for another week. We're just going to do a very quick any other business, and for this I'm going to come to Josh again just to very briefly put us in touch. I'm sure you've all seen the World Cup draw, so we're not going to go through the entire draw, but we thought, even though we don't really do international football on here, it would be silly not to get some people's opinions on the nations they follow. So Josh, England first of all, just briefly give us your thoughts on that group and how you expect England to do.
Well, I'm excited to see Panama. I think that's probably the best thing I can say about that group. For anyone who's been living under a rock, England faced Tunisia in their first game of Group G, then play Panama, and finally play the incredibly overrated Belgium in their group. I expect, well, I should say as an England fan, I expect at least 7 points from this and topping the group. I think it could come down to this Belgium game. Panama, this is just getting to the World Cup is their final to them. I don't think that's speaking too far down on them. It was a fantastic achievement for them to get here. Tunisia, we've seen them. I think the last time we played Tunisia would have been '98 World Cup, which is the first World Cup I can remember. It's actually the first game I can remember of international football. So it'd be good to relive those memories. Hopefully a similar scoreline. I believe it was a 2-1 victory for England. And yeah, the Belgium game, I'm not too worried about that at all, because we've seen these players week in, week out. The vast majority of them play in the Premier League. The only thing I'd be worried about, and Chris, if you're going to watch this as well, is Romelu Lukaku's form against very basic teams, he could cause England problems with their defence. But otherwise, I'll probably migrate very quickly to a Nigeria fan for no reason other than preferring the squad. But we'll see what Gareth Southgate does. But I think getting out of the group is paramount. I think there's a certain way that we want to do this that results in us wanting to finish second, because I think it means we then get Poland, in theory, if they top their group in the next round. But otherwise, it looks to be a fairly interesting tournament. I think when you add even more teams into this, you'll get some even more interesting results. But for me, and looking at the group stage, the Panama game is the most exciting one for me, watching a team play England. But there's other games across the World Cup draw that have got me far more excited than anything in that group.
Yeah, lots of ifs, buts and maybes on that regard. And Joel, from Spain's point of view, fairly confident that we'll see the Spain that we know and love at the major tournament with the group they've got?
Yeah, I think they'll definitely progress. The group with Portugal, Morocco and Iran. I think it'll be obviously decided as to who goes through as group winner. I suspect it'll be Spain. I think they'll beat Portugal, to be honest. And they're not in a bad place, Spain. But they had a dip, obviously, last tournament. They were pretty woeful. But under Lopetegui, they seem to have found some form, and they've still got loads of good players. Like, when you look at the squad, it is so strong. So I think they'll be there or thereabouts. Whether they win it or not, I don't know, but I think they'll definitely be last four.
Yeah, I think you're probably not far off there, and that brings us to France, Lana. Of course, are you fairly confident with that group? I quite like the Australia tie in that particular group. Fairly confident France can progress, even though your nemesis will remain in charge.
No. Because the last time we played Denmark, they kicked us out of the 2002 World Cup, and we were reigning Euro and World Cup champions.
True.
Plus, Denmark are a really good team right now. People don't give them credit because Nicholas Bentner plays for them, but they're actually a really good team. If you watch the game, was it against Ireland, Northern Ireland? It ended with Ireland anyway.
Republic of Ireland, yeah.
Yeah, and Australia, they have this tendency to always show up. It's like they treat every game as a final. I love their mentality because they're so good. To every playoff they've been to, they've always won. Even if they're like just crap, they always perform as good as they can. And I just love that kind of, intensity and mentality that they have. And I wish I could see that in France and not just, squander our Euros at home. But yeah, enough about that. I don't know, who's the fourth one in our group? It's Australia,
Peru.
Denmark.
Yeah,
Peru.
Yeah,
and they're also Peru. A good team. Yeah, no, they beat Argentina.
Yeah, that was at the altitude though. That's the caveat to this. They'll be in a completely different climate, and I think this Peruvian team is fairly shaky. If you're looking at FIFA rankings, I think, as you say, they beat Argentina. That's what's kind of skewing that, and the fact that all South American teams generally end up with quite good FIFA rankings because of who they have to play in qualification. Whereas you look at the European sides and they've got to play the likes of San Marino and the other kind of minnow nations in order to get through their qualifying.
Yeah, I don't know. I have higher hopes of Sweden qualifying from their group, and they're playing Germany, Mexico, and South Korea than I have of France. I have this same gut feeling that I had when we went into the World Cup in 2002 in Japan, that we have the most talented crop of players right now, but we're just going to end up last. Flashback to 2010 South Africa.
Yeah, Chris, question to you. As the biggest hipster of them all, chief hipster, which game from the group stage are you looking most forward to?
See, the problem with that is I'd have to get the World Cup groups up again, wouldn't I? And the World Cup schedule. Here we go, World Cup fixtures. So I wasn't very prepared for this. Of the group stages, I mean, Portugal, Spain sort of stands out because it's Portugal-Spain after all. I think that's probably there. But in terms of hipster though, Nigeria-Argentina jumps off the page at me because I remember back in '94 in America, you had Daniel Amokachi and co and Claudio Kiniggia for Argentina. I remember that being a draw then. That was a very good, entertaining match. Equally, Croatia-Iceland, that could be quite hipsterish. Barring that, I mean, South Korea-Mexico, that's quite hipster.
What about Russia and Saudi Arabia?
No,
hipster's
really...
not the word I'd use for that. And
no,
I wouldn't say jump out of the page. It's going to be an explosive game.
Doesn't light my fire, no, if I'm honest. Germany-Sweden's usually a good watch as well. But yeah, I think probably the Nigeria-Argentina one's the one I'm probably going to plump for, as well as I say the obvious Spain-Portugal. They're probably the two that jump off the page. But in terms of being hipster fixtures, not sure.
I'd have a look for anybody at Japan-Senegal. That's what I'd go for. That game. Yeah. The Japanese, absolutely fantastic, huge work rate.
Raise the game, don't they?
And Senegal, one of the best teams that have come through the African fixtures. I think all the African teams have got a great chance, generally. But that Group D, all of those games in there are going to be fascinating. Argentina, Croatia, the amount of talent in that Croat midfield is just eye-watering. And then you've got the attacking flair of the Nigerians. I might put my neck out on the line. I don't think Argentina will get out of that group if they don't sort their defence out, because there's no top Argentinian defenders at all.
No.
Sergio Romero is their goalkeeper, and he just sits on the bench for the season. He's never been a first-choice goalkeeper. So, and looking how Iceland had upped their game in the Euros, I think that group there could be really interesting, and I do think there could be a couple of shocks. I think Group B as well, Iran and Morocco look incredibly solid, so I wouldn't say dangerous, but solid, and especially if you get a winner out of their game, that puts a tremendous amount of pressure on Portugal and Spain, who you could easily see them very nervously playing out a very dour draw.
Yeah, I do agree. I mean, the thing is, I say, I know we have the running joke on this podcast that we don't do international football, and that remains. But when there's a World Cup, it's a World Cup, isn't it? I'm sure we'll be across it. We won't be doing daily podcasts like we did at the last Euros because, frankly, that killed me. But I'm sure we'll find some time to do a pod after each group game is finished, or something like that. After each full group game is finished, maybe we'll see what we can do, but that's a long way away. So we've only got a couple of questions this week, so we'll finish with those. Just before we do, Josh, we've got something to plug, haven't we, which is, I think we're planning to release this on maybe Wednesday, maybe Thursday, possibly give people a chance to chew this pod over first. But you and I did a spot of recording with two gentlemen on Saturday, didn't we? So do you want to tell our listeners about what's coming up?
Yeah, we did. We dragged a couple of Yanks out of bed. We should say yanked them out of bed to record a MLS special. It was with Jimmy and Pat. It was a great fun, to be honest, to do it with those guys, and they really know their stuff on the game that is soccer and not American football.
Yes, indeed, yeah. Jimmy and Pat were gracious as ever and very good company, and I'm pretty sure, having recorded it, I'm pretty sure our American listeners, and indeed people who are just fans of MLS, will enjoy that special. So look out for that. We'll probably put it out. Likely to put it on Thursday, I think, so people have got enough time to listen to it before MLS Cup final, which is once again Seattle away, being hosted by Toronto FC, which is on Saturday evening. So we'll have the result of that next week, and you've got a podcast to listen to in the meantime. So double pods this week, aren't you lucky? Right then, finishing with questions then. We had one question from Twitter, which was from our good friend Arian. He wants to know when I'm going to be sacked as Pirates manager. That could be any time now, Arian, with our recent run of results. He also wanted to know who's been the signing of the season and flop of the season so far in your respective leagues. Arian, what we're going to do is we're actually going to save that up for next week, because I want our even if people are not available to pod at certain times, I want to get everybody's answer to that one. So we're going to do our best to store that question up and get that answered next week for you. So thank you very much for the question. The other two came by email. One of them is from our good friend Chris H, who likes to email us every once in a while. I'm just going to read this question because it's a little bit lengthy, so I'll just whip through. He says, do any of the panel use EA FIFA as a tool to learn about various levels of the current game and its renowned players? As a North American, I culturally interface with the game on such a radical different level to you than you Eurotrash. Like it. Of course, I was only joking. I apologise for my Eurotrash. I may have been listening. Who may have been listening and were offended. I'm sure they weren't. Don't worry. He said, for example, I woke up at 4:30 a.m. every Saturday to watch. Every Saturday, start watching my day. I have to order 2 separate premium sports channels to sufficiently get enough interesting games, which is only sufficient in the fact that it is on offer. Good luck watching an Istanbul derby. Good luck ever watching an Istanbul derby in Canada, for example. Also, I've literally nobody to talk about the game outside of yourselves, of course. He says. All that said, I actually found the last few editions of FIFA to be remarkable in terms of learning many aspects of the games: tactics, formations, players, skill sets, etc., expectations of defined roles, and what players are suited to which roles, how they combine with players, etc. But my point is, as a North American adult, fairly new to the fandom of the world of football, I find EA's product immensely accurate in its detail. As Europeans, would you echo this in terms of the complexities of the game are just so obvious for your eye, being immersed in such an intense fellowship of the game in your respective nations? So salutations from Vancouver, and God save the Queen. So Josh, you're the obvious one to answer this question. So FIFA, some people get a lot of stick for playing video games and it not being real and all this, and people only watching players on YouTube. But FIFA, there's a good example there from Chris, and thank you for the email, Chris, about how it reaches out to people all around the world who may not necessarily get to see all the players that we see on a weekly basis on TV.
Yeah, as someone who is part of a FIFA team online, I think it does drop into something that I can talk about. I do like the kind of career mode and how you can find certain teams. We were having a discussion, I think, a couple of weeks ago, post-pod, for who I should be picking up as a hipster team with a decent kind of set of players. And I do enjoy just having a look and not necessarily scouting players through it and creating opinions on them, but certainly you'll get those players that come through and you'll go, oh, okay, I'll give them a watch. Or that's how I picked up Sporting Lisbon as a team that I follow in Portugal, because I played with them on FIFA and then got a little bit intrigued of how their style of play actually was and worked on it that way, and certainly helps you understand the whole game as it is. I'm kind of doing this with another sport the other way around, and that's on NFL and learning that through Madden. So I can kind of understand where you're coming from for understanding plays, because before I started doing that, I didn't have a clue for how certain things worked, like offensive and defensive plays and special teams. But I now kind of get my head around it because of that, and learning certain players' names and then looking out for them in real life and seeing how they're getting on. There's a whole cult around Football Manager, as it is with certain players who have come through as certain wonder kids that have never really made it and become like legends, like cult heroes and cult legends outside of the game. And the fact that these games are now used by scouts in teams, thinking Chelsea off the top of my head were one of the teams that have leveraged Football Manager data, because that is now, the game is secondary to the scouting department they've got, because it turns out theirs is the best in the world. So it's certainly got its place, and so long as people don't take it too seriously, that I think that Neymar's going to score 150 goals in Ligue 1 because I've got it down as super easy difficulty, but it certainly gives you an idea of what attributes they have. But there are certain attributes that are overpowered in video games, should we put them rather in their respective leagues. But otherwise, it's a great database to understand players and roughly how they play. and then I'd say going away and actually watch them and see what they do on the actual field.
Yeah, you find players online and then you go and have a look at them, see if they're actually any good in real life. I agree with that. And myself and Nana dabble in FIFA a little bit as well. So it's definitely good and a very good question. So thank you, Chris. And our final question, it's kind of lots of questions. So I'm going to just cherry pick a couple of the ones that has been sent in one email. This one's from Jasper Robbins. And thank you, Jasper, for sending us in this email. Very, very, very kind of you. Some kind words. He says, I'm a big fan of the show since the first listen to the pod when you had Osman Dembele as your hipster's choice. My God, that was a long time ago. Your podcast is excellent. Allows me to get information on other leagues around the world. I'm a supporter of Arsenal, but also watch my local team, Tonbridge Angels. Superb. The odd Charlton game as well. And I was at the Southampton game where Mane scored the fastest Premier League hat-trick. He said a few questions I wanted to ask. So short answers to these if we can. I've just got Lana and Josh left with me because everybody else's internet has died. So Josh, you can have the first two. He says, why do you think no teams in the Premier League or the Championship went for Aitor Karanka in the summer, and why, or recently? And who do you think the manager, Carl Robinson at Charlton, isn't being talked about for the work he's doing? Why do you think he's not being talked about for the work he's doing?
I would say on Aitor Karanka, I think the way that he conducted himself at Middlesbrough and also the opinion that he's got of himself certainly didn't help with him finding another job. He is interestingly in the top 5 in terms of odds to take over at the Hull City position, which is vacant. I think that's pretty much a good place for him to go, somewhere like that, but I'm not sure what his plans are. I think he'd be one of those managers that could take the step up potentially to a lower Premier League team, but as we've seen that most of those teams that needed managers have just appointed the normal kind of standard English manager in the kind of Allardyce Moyes moulds. And on, I think it was Chris Wilder, I think he's getting, certainly within circles of the Championship, a lot of praise for what he's doing at Sheffield United. I think the more that they're able to sustain themselves near the top of the Championship, then the more praise that he'll look to get. He's one of these kind of batch of young managers, young in inverted commas, that look to really push on and could be up for the kind of managers that you'd really want bigger teams in the Premier League to try and have a punt with. But he does have that kind of Eddie Howe like a thing, aura around him that is doing very, very well at his kind of home club where he's had success before, but elsewhere has kind of struggled. So you'd wonder if it's just kind of a match made in heaven with them. But I think if they continue their run, he'll be getting more and more credit.
Yeah, and especially when you bring a club back from where they've been to where they could be headed, I think that says a lot for a manager. There's 2 other questions for both myself and Alana, so I'll take 2 and Lana can have 2. I shall answer these quickly. So, out of the top leagues in Europe, why does Ligue 1 get the most stick? So Lana, you can definitely have that one. And also, he asks who's the surprise package of the season for each of the top 5 leagues. Can you just give us one from France and one from Italy? Because I know that's the 2 leagues you watch the most. But yeah, and why is it that Ligue 1 gets so much stick, do you think?
I think it's because people always think that it's a feather league, which I can understand why they would think so. But I think it, like most, jobs or, opportunities you get in life, you move upwards. And that doesn't necessarily mean that the job you had was bad. It's just that you have goals you want to reach. And then in order to reach those goals, you climb upwards to the biggest clubs in Europe. And you have to start somewhere. And in most French, clubs, they start out well and then they move upwards because they get, the attention from other big clubs in Europe. And you cannot expect someone, say like Amiens, to compete with the likes of Barcelona, Madrid, Arsenal, Bayern, and it's obvious that a player wants to move upwards. And I think that before, when the Newcastles and the Aston Villas and the Sunderlands and the Liverpools all would get the French players, but I think that the current generation have learned from the previous mistakes, and you see more and more players rejecting moves abroad and staying in France, which I think it's amazing. I mean, barring Tolisso, Umtiti, Lacazette, it was time for them to go. But it's so refreshing to see that other players decide to stay and, continue with their clubs before moving abroad or to another bigger club. And we talked about it before as well, that I felt that Mbappe moving was too soon, although he stayed, in France. But it gets a lot of stick, which I find very unfair, considering some of the greatest players in the past all came from France, and the current, next Ballon d'Or winners, next great things are all from France. You hear about the Mbappes, the Martials, Dembele, Umtiti, Lacazette. These are all star players going forward, and many of them have the opportunity to win the league, Ballon d'Ors, and the Champions League, putting their teams in the World Cup final. You never know. But I see less and less stick than I used to a year ago. So I think it's finally getting the respect it deserves compared to before.
Yeah, so do I. I think, well, you know me, I'm a little bit biased, but I completely agree. I think it has. Okay, the final two parts of the questions from Jasper. I'll take both. Who's the dark horse at the World Cup, and what do you think of the World Cup groups? Well, we've covered the World Cup groups, so that one's sorted. Happy days. Hopefully we answered that question for you at the time there, Jasper. And who's the dark horse of the World Cup? Trying to resist the temptation to say all of the obvious teams that are obvious dark horses. So I'm trying to avoid Belgium and trying to avoid Portugal, and I would argue Argentina are an underdog. I think Uruguay weirdly might be worth a look. Some bright young talent coming through there. Still the classics, he's still got Cavani's goals when he's on song, still got Godin when he's not stinking it up. He's been not as good this season, but overall is a very reliable centre-back. It's a fairly winnable group, I think, for Uruguay, not just qualifying, but I think it's a winnable group. And the passage doesn't seem too bad. And when a team like Uruguay with a rich World Cup history takes on a team like, I don't know, a Brazil, who's one of the favourites, things can often go against the green, because it's sort of two South American sides clashing. So yeah, I'm gonna go with Uruguay as my outside bet. I wouldn't put any money of massive granditude on them, but I think they might surprise a few. So we shall see. Good stuff. And he just ends off by saying, keep up the good work, really enjoy the podcast. So thank you, Jasper, we really appreciate you listening. And if you go to any Tonbridge Angels games in the near future, send us a few pictures and we'll retweet them for you, as we did on Saturday, when our regular listener, regular correspondent, Tom Bates, he was at the MK Dons game in the FA Cup, and I think it's against Maidstone United, which I think he was actually following Maidstone at the time. Retweeted a few of his pictures, so thank you very much for those, Tom. Little shout out to you. So yeah, thank you very much, and that is where we will end this week's podcast. We've gone slightly over our 90 minutes, but not too much, so hopefully you've stayed with us. Thank you very much for listening. As usual, you can find us in those standard places you'd expect: iTunes, YouTube, our website, and of course SoundCloud, as well as a few other apps that I'm sure we've been dotted around which we don't even know about. Keep sending us your feedback. Obviously questions, we can answer as many as we have time to answer, so if you've got anything you want to chuck us, send us our way, and send us those pictures of your travels if you go out and about, so watching football from around the world. Joel and Ross have disconnected because their internet has been cruel on us, but delighted to have them back tonight, so thank you to those two. Also thank you very much for Lana for racing back in for half the show, so thank you, Lana.
You're welcome. Everything for the fans.
Naturally, that's what we like. And also thank you, Josh, for pressing the buttons and giving your opinions as usual.
That's all right. I had to be here.
Yeah, so do I. And of course, a big shout out to John, who's still very much with the team and makes these happen week in, week out by putting them all together for us. So thank you very much to John. Keep your eyes peeled, as we say, for that MLS special. That will be released, as I say, probably Thursday in the UK, maybe Thursday afternoon or evening, not really sure yet, but it'll be out with plenty of time for you to get that in your ears before MLS Cup final on Saturday. Our thanks to Jimmy and Pat, as usual. And just to round off the show, thanks to 4 Elements. You heard them at the top. There are loyal sponsors this season, bringing us a huge amount of help and web space, bits and bobs as it goes. So thank you to Chris and the team, and do check them out if you've got any internet needs, or website needs, I should say. So that's where we'll end this week's podcast. Keep your beard strong and your glasses trendy. I have been Chris. You can find us at the FH Podcast on Twitter. Many thanks for listening, and enjoy your week's football.